In Istanbul, a group of journalists have gathered to ring alarm bells about what they say is an increasing threat to the freedom of the press. The case of Ahmet Şık, the journalist arrested while writing a book about the Gulen movement, is widely cited here as evidence of the risks journalists face in today's Turkey. Mr. Şık was accused of links to what's known as the Ergenekon conspiracy. Ergenekon is a catch-all name for an alleged plot by right-wing extremists, hardline secularists and army generals to overthrow the state. But many opposition figures in Turkey believe it's become a handy excuse for locking up anyone the government doesn't like. This meeting was organised by Dogan Tilic and Faray Tunç.
We have two friends, two journalists, very prominent investigative journalists. They were arrested with the pretext of the relation with the Ergenekon case. But the main reason is that they have written articles and books against the Gulen movement. So we know that it's not easy in Turkey now to talk against Gulen movement.
People have told us that journalists are too frightened to write pieces about the Gulen movement now. Is that true?
Monopolization is always a threat to press freedom. Today we have about 60% of the media which is pro-government, and I don't know how you can differentiate between pro-government and pro-Gulen media. When there is a perception that there is a huge media concentration on one side which is pro-government or pro-Gulen, then having a critical stand to that is difficult. And also there are very concrete cases when people refer or criticize Gulen movement, they have suddenly problems. So it became a slogan, what Ahmet Şık has said when he was taken under arrest. Those who touch is burning. He meant if you touch the Gulen movement, you are having problems.
One of those attending the conference was Hacı Bogatekin, a Kurdish journalist from southeastern Turkey.
He wrote that like Fethullah Gülen followers and the Kurdish leaders, Abdullah Öcalan's followers and seculars are the three forces in Turkey trying to define the political scheme. He clearly indicated that Gulen movement was taking all these spaces in the state institutions, and this article was seen as a propaganda for terrorist movement, and then he was sent to jail in Malatya and he was there for 1.5 years.
What did you say about the Gulen movement that made them angry?
He was interviewing people and he could foresee that the Gulen movement had inserted people in every realm, like the justice system, education system, etc. And because of that, he got 21 investigations, and 16 of these investigations turned into a court case.
The imprisonment of journalists is the tip of the iceberg. You know, nobody dares to write directly against Gulen movement. Nobody dares. There's a strong censorship on that issue.
Almost everyone agrees that not so long ago there really were right-wing conspirators and even death squads at work in the shadows of Turkish society, a system the Turks call the deep state. So the Ergenekon investigations initially attracted widespread support. Gareth Jenkins is a British writer and analyst who's been based in Istanbul for more than 2 decades. He was one of those who supported the investigations when they began, but changed his mind because he believed the AK, or Justice and Development Party, were exploiting them for their own ends.
What the defenders of the Ergenekon investigation have done is to say this is going after the deep state. The reality is it's not going after the deep state. It's going after opponents of the government. The only common denominator of all of these people is they're opposed to the ruling Justice and Development Party, and in particular to the Fethullah Gülen movement.
You went public with those views, you wrote a piece about it. What then happened?
I wrote a report about the Ergenekon investigation, and then I gave some talks in Washington in November 2009, one in the Congress building in Washington. And all hell broke loose, really, when I gave the talks in Washington, particularly from the media organs associated with the Fethullah Gülen group, who had been lobbying very hard in Washington with the American government, set up several NGOs, and were trying to present themselves as the acceptable face of moderate Islam. And so when I said in Washington that actually there are members within the organization who are doing things which are different, all hell broke loose, to the point where my phone never stopped ringing. I had smear campaigns against me in the press. I got attacked by politicians associated with the movement. I got accused for working for 4 intelligence agencies, of being a Jew, of being a Freemason, all the other conspiracy theories you can think of, in a manifest attempt to try to silence me.
Were you at any stage, do you feel, at risk of violent reprisals, or was it essentially verbal?
To be fair to the Fethullah Gulen movement, they are resolutely opposed to violence. But the problem is that when you flag somebody up, then you do get some fanatics who take it seriously. And when I was actually working on something else, I came across some jihadist websites who had quotations from the Fethullah Gulen press, and then my address underneath. Very clearly, the message was go and kill this guy.
The cautionary tale that's done the most serious damage to the Gulen movement's reputation in Turkey is the humbling of İlhan Cihan'a, once a successful and popular state prosecutor. He built a reputation on his willingness to take on the real killers and conspirators from Turkey's bad old days, and then he began investigating Gulen supporters operating on his patch in eastern Turkey.
Kayseri'de cemaat mensubu 2 askerin.
The first thing I found was in Kayseri. The evidence was that 2 soldiers who were members of the Gulen movement had published fake military documents. These were similar to those used in evidence in the Ergenekon court cases. The second was that in police schools, the test questions for the major entry exam were distributed through the Gulen movement before the exam as a way of infiltrating the police. I also found evidence of financial issues. The movement was collecting donations in my city, Erzincan, to fund a school in Mozambique. But some of that money disappeared, and I was trying to work out where it went. While I was carrying out my investigation, the private court in Erzurum started its own investigation into me. It was totally illegal because state prosecutors like me can only be prosecuted by higher legal authorities. The accusation that started the case came from a secret witness who was a member of the Gulen movement.
And what exactly was the accusation?
They said I was the mastermind behind a plan to destroy the Gulen movement and the AK party. It was beyond logic. I've taken out prosecutions against suspects in the Ergenekon case, but even though I'm someone who prosecutes Ergenekon suspects, suddenly I'm supposed to be one of them.
One of the suspicions that people have about the movement is that it has infiltrated the police force, the judiciary, prosecutors' offices and so forth. From your experience as a state prosecutor, do you think that's true? Did you see evidence of that in the course of your work?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to meet an officer from the Turkish intelligence agency, but he wasn't allowed to act as a witness. Anyone who opposes the movement faces obstacles. Those who support it are promoted.
Do you think, based on what you did manage to find out, that that would have taken you to a place where you could have laid criminal charges?
I
was gathering evidence. We'd requested the movement's financial records. I'd written letters to the banks to track money transfers and the trips abroad, entry-exit, etc. I didn't get a chance to see them. As far as I could tell, there was concrete evidence in Kayseri. There were 2 soldiers, members of the Gulen movement, who confessed to faking documents. The person who supplied those documents had been identified. The military prosecutor who was running the investigation was also arrested for some other reasons.
İlhan Cihan'a was forced out of his job and could still face charges. He's now a parliamentary candidate for the main opposition party in next month's elections. Gulen supporters like Cemal Uşak dismiss his allegations.
It's a claim that İlhan Cihan'a was dismissed because of his investigation into the Gulen movement. He was arrested because of his work investigating other Islamic groups. There's no direct connection with us.
The other well-known case recently has been that of Ahmed Şik, the journalist who wrote a book about the movement, or was writing one, and was then arrested. And in both cases, people see evidence that if anybody looks at the movement, they run into trouble with the authorities. Do you accept that that is at least a worry for you, that people think that?
Of course, both incidents being connected to the movement's a big worry. But to think that Gulen followers are involved in such activities, that they'd persecute such people, it's illogical. They must be out of their minds to think such a thing. That would harm the believers of the movement. It's not something a believer would ever think of.
How would you describe the movement's relationship with the current government?
Most of our sympathisers are in favour of the ruling party.
Do you think there's a danger that that crosses the line separating Islam from politics in many ways?
As a citizen, it's my duty to support or not support a party.
But it's not just you, is it? I mean, this very powerful movement is perceived to be supporting the government.
It's not our fault that we're very powerful.
The movement's opponents say that power is what it's really about. Power before anything else. The former prosecutor, İlhan Cihana.
In my opinion, the movement is less driven by faith and religion than by political and economic interests. They're not really worried about religion. They want power, and the colour of that power doesn't matter to them.
But inspired by a vision of Turkey, or?
They just want to gain control over everything.
Just power, nothing more than that.
That's how I see it.
Is the Gulen movement a Muslim version of the big society, a perfect marriage of private philanthropy and private enterprise for the general good? Or is it a sinister conspiracy to move within the arteries of the system to secure state power? Some of those who've studied it closely think it could be a bit of both. Fethullah Gulen certainly seems to have hit on a unique and winning formula, and his movement seems destined to keep on growing. His followers may not be entirely comfortable with the attention they're now attracting, but the movement is simply too big and too successful to ignore. Let the last word go to one of the most prominent supporters of the movement, or Hizmet as so many of them like to call it, the writer Kerim Balci.
We will stay as a minority, but we will have a say in the shaping of the future of human society, not Islamic society, of the human society. And when I say we, I will assure you that it won't be a kind of centralistic decision. It will be individuals that are educated into this movement.